I still remember the moment everything changed. There I was, 8 months pregnant with our first child, waddling around our modest suburban home in Boston, trying to find a comfortable position on the couch. David, my husband of 3 years, was typing away on his laptop at the kitchen table, probably responding to another one of his mother's incessant text messages. "Honey," I called out, wincing as our daughter delivered a particularly strong kick to my ribs. "Can we talk about Mother's Day next month? I know it sounds silly since the baby won't be here yet, but—" David looked up, his expression softening. "It's not silly, Emma. You're already a mum, even if she's still cooking." He set his laptop aside and joined me on the couch, placing a gentle hand on my swollen belly. "What did you have in mind?" I leaned into him, grateful for his warmth. "Nothing extravagant. Maybe brunch at that new place in Cambridge? I've heard their stuffed French toast is amazing." I paused, then added hesitantly, "And maybe just us. I know your mum usually expects to see you on Mother's Day, but—" His body tensed slightly, but he nodded. "I'll talk to her. This year should be about you too." I should have known better. I should have seen the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Because when it comes to Margaret Winters, my mother-in-law, nothing is ever simple, especially when it involves her precious son. Margaret had never approved of me from the start. I wasn't from the right neighbourhood, didn't attend the right schools, and worst of all, I had taken her son away from her. David was the only child of a widow, and before me, his entire world had revolved around his mother. They had Sunday dinners together without fail. He consulted her on every major decision. She even had a key to his apartment, which she used liberally and without warning. When we first started dating, I tried everything to win her over. I complimented her immaculately kept colonial home in Beacon Hill, praised her charity work with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and listened patiently to stories about David's childhood that I'd already heard from him directly. Nothing worked. To Margaret, I would always be the administrative assistant who had somehow manipulated her Harvard-educated son into marriage. What Margaret didn't know, or chose to ignore, was that I had put myself through UMass Boston working 2 jobs. That I had been promoted 3 times in 4 years at the architectural firm where David and I had met. That I loved her son fiercely and completely, not for his family name or his trust fund, but for his kind heart and gentle soul. The weeks leading up to my first Mother's Day passed in a blur of doctor's appointments, birthing classes, and last-minute nursery preparations. David had been supportive but distracted, constantly checking his phone and having hushed conversations with his mother that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, this was a transition for everyone. The Friday before Mother's Day, I was folding tiny onesies in the nursery when David came home from work looking troubled. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting aside a pink sleeper embroidered with butterflies. He ran a hand through his dark hair. A nervous habit he'd had since college. "Mum called. She's planned a big Mother's Day lunch at the country club. All her friends will be there, and she's expecting us to attend." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "But we talked about this. We were going to have brunch, just the 2 of us." "I know. But she's already made the reservations, paid for everything." He sat on the ottoman, not quite meeting my eyes. "She's even telling everyone that we have a big announcement to make." "What announcement?" My voice had an edge to it now. "I think she wants to announce the baby's name." My hands clenched involuntarily. "We haven't even decided on a name yet, and even if we had, that wouldn't be her announcement to make." I know. He looked miserable. "But maybe we could do both. Early brunch with you, then the club with Mum." I stared at him, disbelief and disappointment coursing through me. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm 8 months pregnant. I can barely stay on my feet for more than an hour without my ankles swelling to the size of grapefruits. And you want me to sit through 2 separate events, one of which will be with people who will spend the entire time scrutinizing every aspect of my appearance and background." "They're not that bad," he said weakly. "Your mother's friend Cecilia asked me last Christmas if my family was new money, or if we'd always been comfortable." I mimicked her posh accent. When I told her my dad is a plumber, and my mum works at a grocery store, she looked like she'd swallowed her pearls. David sighed. Just this once. Emma, please? Mum's been looking forward to this. She's even ordered a special cake. I felt the baby shift inside me, a gentle reminder of what truly mattered. Fine, I conceded, too tired to argue further. But we're having our brunch first, and we're leaving the club by 3. I need to rest. He crossed the room and kissed me, relief evident in his eyes. Thank you. I promise it won't be that bad. If only I had known how wrong he would be. Mother's Day dawned bright and clear, a perfect New England spring morning. David surprised me with breakfast in bed, strawberry pancakes with real maple syrup, my favourite, and a small blue velvet box. Happy Mother's Day, he said, placing the box in my hand. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a tiny diamond-encrusted baby shoe pendant. It's beautiful, I whispered, genuinely touched. Turn it over, he urged. Engraved on the back were the words, Emma's first Mother's Day. My eyes filled with tears. I love it, thank you. I leaned forward for a kiss, feeling hopeful about the day ahead. Our brunch at the Cambridge restaurant was lovely but rushed. David kept checking his watch, clearly anxious about being late to his mother's event. We barely had time to enjoy our food before he was settling the bill and helping me to the car. The Westbrook Country Club was exactly as pretentious as I'd expected. Massive columns flanked the entrance, and a uniformed attendant took our car keys with a deferential nod to David. Inside, the dining room was a sea of pastel spring dresses and sport coats, with elaborate floral centerpieces adorning each table. Margaret spotted us immediately, rising from her seat at the center table and waving imperiously. She was impeccably dressed as always, in a powder blue suit that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, not a strand out of place. Darling, she exclaimed, embracing David while barely acknowledging my presence. We were beginning to worry. Everyone's been waiting. She gestured to the table, where 6 of her closest friends sat with their husbands, all eyeing me with barely concealed curiosity. Sorry, Mum, traffic was terrible. David pulled out a chair for me before taking his own seat beside his mother. Well, you're here now. Margaret turned to the table. Everyone, you remember David's wife, Emily? Emma, I corrected quietly. Of course, Emma. She smiled tightly. Emma is expecting our little bundle of joy next month, a girl. She said this as if she'd personally arranged for the gender herself. The next 2 hours were excruciating. Margaret held court, regaling everyone with stories of David's childhood, frequently punctuated with comments like, of course, as her grandmother, I'll make sure she appreciates the finer things in life, and David and I have already discussed sending her to my alma mater for preschool. Each time she spoke about our unborn daughter, as if she had some sort of claim on her, I felt my blood pressure rise. David, to his credit, occasionally tried to redirect the conversation, but he was no match for his mother's social dominance. As dessert was being served, an elaborate cake decorated with, Congratulations, Grandmother Margaret, in elegant script, I excused myself to the restroom. My back was aching, and I needed a moment away from Margaret's suffocating presence. In the privacy of the marble-lined bathroom, I leaned against the cool counter and took several deep breaths. Just another hour, I told myself. Then we can go home. When I returned to the table, Margaret was standing, champagne flute in hand. Now that everyone's here, she announced, I'd like to make a special toast. The table fell silent, all eyes on my mother-in-law. As you all know, I'm about to embark on the most important role of my life, grandmother to little Elizabeth Margaret Winters. I froze. Elizabeth Margaret. We had never discussed that name. In fact, David and I had been leaning toward Sophia Grace after my late grandmother. Margaret continued, oblivious to my shock. David and Emma have graciously agreed to honour me by naming their daughter after me, which is particularly meaningful as she'll be born so close to Mother's Day. The table erupted in appreciative murmurs and congratulations. I looked at David, waiting for him to correct his mother, to explain that we hadn't chosen a name yet. Instead, he smiled weakly and raised his water glass in acknowledgement. In that moment, something inside me snapped. all the months of subtle put-downs, of boundary violations, of David's inability to stand up to his mother. It all came crashing down on me at once. I pushed back my chair and stood up, my hands shaking with a combination of hormones and rage. "I'm sorry, but there must be some confusion," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We haven't decided on a name for our daughter yet, and when we do, it will be a decision that David and I make together." The table fell silent. Margaret's smile froze on her face. "Emma," David said in a low voice, "maybe we should discuss this at home." "No, I think we need to be clear right now." I turned to address the table. "While we appreciate everyone's interest in our baby, the decisions about her name, her education, and her upbringing will be made by her parents, David and me." Margaret's face flushed an alarming shade of red. "I was only trying to help. David mentioned you were having trouble deciding on a name, and since Elizabeth is a family name on our side—" "When did David tell you that?" I interrupted. "Because he and I were discussing names just last night, and he never mentioned anything about Elizabeth Margaret." All eyes turned to David, who looked like he wanted to disappear into his dessert plate. "Well," Margaret said after an uncomfortable pause, "perhaps I misunderstood. But surely you can see that Elizabeth Margaret honours both our family's traditions. It's a distinguished name, with history and prestige." I could feel tears threatening. But I refused to cry in front of these people. "My family may not have your kind of history or prestige, Margaret, but we have love and respect for each other's choices, something that seems to be in short supply here today." With that, I placed my napkin on the table and turned to David. "I'd like to go home now." The car ride back to our house in Somerville was painfully silent. David gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, but he didn't say a word until we pulled into our driveway. "You embarrassed my mother in front of all her friends," he finally said, his voice tight with anger. I stared at him in disbelief. "Your mother announced a name for our child without even consulting us. Planned an entire event on a day that was supposed to be special for me too, and I'm the one who embarrassed her. She was trying to do something nice. She's excited about becoming a grandmother." "No, David. She was trying to control our child before she's even born, just like she tries to control every aspect of your life." I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to face him fully. "And the worst part is you let her." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You promised me that today would be about us, about our growing family. Instead, it became the Margaret Winters show, as usual." My voice broke. "And you didn't even try to stop it." David ran his hands over his face. "What was I supposed to do, cause a scene? You were supposed to stand up for me, for us, for our daughter." The tears I'd been holding back all day finally spilled over. "But you couldn't even do that on Mother's Day." I got out of the car and headed for the house, my heart heavier than the child I carried inside me. Behind me, I heard David's door slam and his footsteps following me up the path. Inside, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. David hovered uncertainly in the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "You're right. I should have said something. It's just... You don't know what she's like when she doesn't get her way." "Actually, I do," I replied softly. "I've been dealing with the fallout of her not getting her way since the day we met. The difference is, I don't cave to her demands." He sat beside me, a respectable distance between us. "She's been through a lot, Emma. After my dad died, it was just the two of us for so long. She devoted her entire life to me. And that's admirable, David. It is. But you're not a child anymore. You're a husband, and you're about to be a father. Your priorities need to shift." He nodded slowly. "I know. It's just hard to break old patterns." I placed a hand on my belly, feeling our daughter's reassuring movements. "I understand that. But I need you to hear me when I say this. I can't keep living like this. I won't raise our daughter in an environment where her grandmother undermines my authority as her mother and her father doesn't have the courage to stop it." David looked stricken. "What are you saying?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what needed to be said. "I'm saying that you need to make a choice. Either you set clear boundaries with your mother and start putting our family first, or..." what? His voice was barely audible. Or I won't stay in this marriage. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with finality. You'd leave me. The hurt in his eyes was almost unbearable, but I held firm. I don't want to. I love you, David. But I love our daughter too, and I need to protect her, and myself, from this toxic dynamic. It's not healthy, and it's not going to get better unless something changes dramatically. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to set clear, firm boundaries with your mother. No more unannounced visits. No more making decisions about our family without consulting me. No more letting her dictate how we live our lives. I paused, gathering my courage. And I think we need to see a family therapist to help us navigate this new chapter. All of us. You, me, and Margaret. David looked up, surprise evident on his face. You'd be willing to go to therapy with my mother? If it means saving our marriage and creating a healthy environment for our daughter. Yes, but only if you're fully committed to making real changes. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. I don't want to lose you, Emma. Either of you. He placed his other hand on my belly. I'll do whatever it takes. I wanted to believe him. I desperately wanted to believe that this time would be different. That he would finally stand up to the woman who had controlled him his entire life. But I'd heard promises before. I need more than words this time, David. I need action. I shifted uncomfortably, my back protesting the long day. Starting with a phone call to your mother, right now, explaining that we haven't chosen a name for our daughter yet, and won't be announcing one until after she's born. He hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I can do that. As he reached for his phone, I added, and on speaker. I need to hear this. The look he gave me was a mixture of resentment and understanding, but he complied, dialing his mother's number and putting the call on speaker. Margaret answered on the second ring. David, is everything all right? You left in such a hurry. Everything's fine, Mum, but I need to talk to you about something important. He glanced at me and I nodded encouragingly. Emma and I haven't decided on a name for the baby yet. What you announced at lunch today wasn't something we had agreed to. There was a long pause. Well, I only mentioned it because you seemed so fond of the name when we discussed it last week. I raised an eyebrow at David, who had the grace to look ashamed. We were just talking hypothetically, Mum. I never said that was the name we had chosen. His voice grew stronger. The point is, Emma and I will decide on our daughter's name together, and we'll announce it when we're ready. I see. Margaret's voice was cold. So your wife has convinced you to disregard family tradition? David took a deep breath. This isn't about disregarding anything. It's about Emma and me making decisions for our family together. He paused, then added, and I need you to respect those decisions, even if you don't agree with them. I have always respected your decisions, David, Margaret replied, her tone wounded. Everything I've ever done has been for your benefit. I know, Mom, and I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I'm a husband and father now, and my priority has to be Emma and our baby. Another lengthy silence followed. Finally, Margaret said, I suppose I'll have to accept that things are changing, but don't expect me to pretend to be happy about it. I'm not asking you to pretend anything, David replied. I'm just asking you to respect our boundaries. Fine, Margaret said curtly. Is there anything else you'd like to chastise me for today? David looked at me, a question in his eyes. I shook my head slightly, one battle at a time. No, Mom. I'll talk to you later this week. Goodbye. He ended the call and set the phone down on the coffee table. Well, that went about as well as expected. It's a start, I acknowledged. Thank you for doing that. He moved closer on the couch, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. I meant what I said, Emma. I'm going to do better. For you and for our daughter. I leaned into him, allowing myself to hope. I'm going to hold you to that. In the days that followed, David was true to his word. He researched family therapists in the area and scheduled an appointment for the following week. He called his mother daily, but kept the conversations brief and maintained the boundaries we had discussed. When Margaret called me directly, trying to bypass David, he firmly redirected her to speak with him instead. It wasn't easy. There were tearful phone calls, accusations of abandonment, and even one dramatic appearance at our front door where Margaret claimed to be checking on the baby's welfare. But David stood firm, even when I could see how much it pained him to upset his mother. 2 weeks after Mother's Day, our daughter decided to make an early entrance into the world. My water broke during dinner, and after 16 hours of labour, Sophia Grace Winters was born, a perfect 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with her father's dark hair and what the nurses swore was my determined chin. Holding her for the first time, I felt a love so fierce and protective it took my breath away. Looking up at David, who was gazing at our daughter with tears streaming down his face, I knew he felt the same way. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching Sophia's tiny hand. "Absolutely perfect." We had agreed to call our parents after we'd had some time alone with the baby. David's hand shook slightly as he dialed his mother's number, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Mom, it's David. Emma had the baby, a healthy girl. We've named her Sophia Grace." He paused, listening. "Yes, after Emma's grandmother, because it's a name that means something to us. We'd love for you to meet her, but there are some ground rules we need to discuss first." I watched with pride as my husband firmly but kindly established expectations for his mother's first visit with her granddaughter. No unannounced visits, no contradicting our parenting decisions, no disparaging comments about me or my family. When he hung up, he looked both drained and relieved. "She's coming tomorrow afternoon. She's not thrilled about the name, but she did say she's looking forward to meeting her granddaughter." "That's progress," I said, adjusting Sophia in my arms. "How do you feel?" He sat on the edge of the hospital bed, gazing at our daughter. Terrified, elated, ready. He looked up at me, his eyes clear and determined. "I meant what I said about putting our family first, Emma. Seeing her, holding her, it changes everything. I won't let anyone come between us, not even my mother." I believed him this time, not just because of his words, but because of the actions he had taken over the past 2 weeks. The way he had stood up to Margaret, the way he had prioritised our needs, the way he had committed to making real changes. The next day, Margaret arrived at the hospital precisely at the time David had specified. She was carrying an enormous teddy bear and a small, elegantly wrapped package. "Hello, Margaret," I greeted her, Sophia sleeping peacefully in my arms. "Come meet your granddaughter." She approached cautiously, her eyes fixed on the baby. "She's lovely," she admitted, her expression softening. "May I hold her?" I looked at David, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Of course," I said, carefully transferring Sophia to her grandmother's arms. Margaret cradled her with unexpected tenderness, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "She has the winter's nose," she observed. "And your eyes, I think, Emma." I blinked in surprise at the compliment. "Thank you." "I brought her something," Margaret said, nodding toward the package on the side table. "It's tradition in our family." David picked up the package and unwrapped it, revealing a small silver frame. Inside was a delicate piece of lace. "Mum's christening gown," he explained to me. "Every Winter's baby has worn it for generations." I felt a lump form in my throat. Despite everything, this was a meaningful gesture. "It's beautiful," I said sincerely. "Thank you for sharing this with us." Margaret met my eyes, a hint of vulnerability in her gaze. "I know I can be difficult, but I do want what's best for this child, for all of you." "I believe that," I replied, "and I hope you know that we want you to be part of Sophia's life. We just need to establish some healthy boundaries so we can all move forward together." She nodded stiffly, returning her attention to the baby. "She truly is perfect," she murmured. "Hello, Sophia. I'm your grandmother. We're going to have to get to know each other, aren't we?" It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a promise to change, but it was an acknowledgement, however small, that things would be different from now on. And for today, that was enough. As I watched Margaret with our daughter, I realised that the ultimatum I had given David wasn't just about standing up to his mother. It was about creating a family dynamic based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. It was about breaking destructive patterns and establishing new, healthier ones. It was about ensuring that Sophia would grow up in a home where her parents' relationship was strong and united. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Margaret's lifelong habits of control and manipulation wouldn't disappear overnight. There would be setbacks, arguments, moments of doubt. But looking at David, watching him watch his mother and daughter together with a mixture of love and protective vigilance, I knew we had turned a corner. Later, when Margaret had gone and Sophia was sleeping in her hospital bassinet, David sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for forcing me to make a choice when I couldn't see how necessary it was." He brought my hand to his lips. "For giving me the chance to be the husband and father you both deserve." I squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of his words. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" He looked over at our sleeping daughter, then back at me, his eyes full of determination and hope. "More than okay. We're going to be extraordinary." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, we celebrated my birthday with a small gathering in our backyard. My parents were there, chatting amiably with David's college friends. Sophia was being passed from one adoring set of arms to another, soaking up the attention with her father's easy charm and my infectious laugh. Margaret arrived precisely on time, carrying a beautifully wrapped gift and a small cake from my favourite bakery. She greeted my parents warmly, a new development that still surprised me, and made her way to where I was setting out plates on the patio table. "Happy birthday, Emma," she said, handing me the gift. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of ordering your favourite cake. David mentioned you've been too busy to pick one up yourself." That was thoughtful. "Thank you." I accepted both the gift and the gesture for what they were, small steps toward a new kind of relationship. We had been seeing Dr. Chen, a family therapist specialising in intergenerational dynamics, for the past 5 months. The sessions were often tense, sometimes tearful, but always productive. Margaret had resisted at first, insisting that airing family laundry to strangers was beneath the winter's dignity. But she had shown up for every appointment, gradually opening up about her fears of being replaced, her struggle to find purpose after widowhood, her deep-seated belief that controlling David's life was the only way to remain connected to him. For his part, David had learned to set and maintain boundaries without guilt. He had begun to understand how his desire to please his mother had nearly cost him his marriage, and he had found the courage to forge a new relationship with Margaret, one based on adult mutual respect rather than childhood dependence. As for me, I had come to see Margaret not just as the overbearing mother-in-law who had ruined my first Mother's Day, but as a complex woman who had devoted her life to her only child and was now struggling to redefine her role. I didn't excuse her behaviour, but I had begun to understand it, and in that understanding, I had found a measure of compassion. "Sophia looks more like you every day," Margaret observed, watching as my mother bounced the baby on her knee. "She has your determination." I smiled. "David says she has your stubbornness." Instead of taking offence, Margaret laughed, a genuine sound that I was hearing more frequently these days. "Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. A woman needs to be stubborn in this world." She paused, then added quietly, "You taught me that." I looked at her in surprise. "I did." She nodded, her expression uncharacteristically reflective. "That day at the country club, no one had ever stood up to me like that before. Certainly not in defence of their family." She straightened a napkin on the table, avoiding my eyes. It made me realise that perhaps I had been going about things all wrong. Before I could respond, David appeared with a glass of wine for each of us. "Everything okay over here?" he asked, his gaze moving between his mother and me. "Everything's fine," I assured him. "Your mother was just imparting some winter's wisdom about the value of stubbornness." He grinned. "Well, between the 3 generations of stubborn women in this family, I don't stand a chance, do I?" "No," Margaret and I said in unison, then looked at each other in startled amusement. As the party continued around us, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had taken over the past 6 months. From the ultimatum that had changed everything to the careful, sometimes painful rebuilding of trust and establishment of new boundaries. From a Mother's Day disaster to a birthday celebration where Margaret could refer to us as family without a hint of reluctance or resentment. We weren't perfect. Margaret still occasionally overstepped, David still sometimes struggled to stand firm, and I still had moments of doubt and insecurity. But we were trying, all of us, to create something new and healthy for Sophia's sake. And in that effort, we had begun to forge unexpected connections and understandings. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and Sophia was sleeping soundly in her crib, David and I sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Did I ever thank you?" he asked suddenly. "For what?" "For that ultimatum. For loving me enough to demand more from me." I leaned against his shoulder. "You did. But you can always thank me again." He chuckled, pulling me closer. "Thank you for not settling, for believing we could be better than we were." "We are better," I said softly. "All of us." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Mom asked me today if we would consider having Sophia wear the family christening gown. Not because it's tradition, or because she's insisting, but because she'd like to share that with her granddaughter." "What did you tell her?" "That we'd discuss it together and let her know." He glanced at me. "That's progress, right?" I nodded, thinking of Margaret's unexpected moment of vulnerability earlier. "Definite progress. And I'm open to the idea, as long as it's our decision." "It will be," he promised. "Everything about Sophia's life will be our decision together." He kissed the top of my head. No more caving to pressure, no more avoiding conflict at the expense of our family's well-being. As we sat there, wrapped in the quiet contentment of a day well spent, I thought about the long road ahead. Raising Sophia, navigating the complex family dynamics, continuing to strengthen our marriage through whatever challenges came our way. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be more difficult conversations, more boundaries to establish, more growth needed from all of us. But I knew now that we were capable of meeting those challenges head-on, together. The ultimatum that had seemed so drastic, so final on that painful Mother's Day, had turned out to be not an ending, but a beginning. A beginning of honesty, of courage, of a family defined not by who controlled whom, but by mutual respect and genuine love. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, Sophia's gentle breathing coming through the monitor and David's steady heartbeat beneath my ear, I knew with absolute certainty that we had made the right choice. Not just for ourselves, not just for our marriage, but for the daughter who would grow up knowing that her mother and father had fought for something better, and won. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left